You're listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.
Hi, it's Louisa Tanner Munson from feelgoodastrology.com, and I'd like to welcome you to this podcast exploring the meaning of having the North Node in the 5th house. So this is a two-part podcast, I guess, because the first part we're going to look at is the implications of being born with the North Node in the 5th house. So what does that mean to you as a person in your birth chart? The second part of this podcast is looking at what might happen should the North Node be going through your 5th house. So, what effects is that going to have on your life over the next 18 months? So before we get cracking, we need to just have an understanding of what the North Node is and also an understanding of the 5th house. So this is where I like to talk a little bit about opposites and how things are often measured in pairs. The North Node, we never really read the North Node on its own because it's part of a movement, and I guess the best way of considering it is you've got the South Node describing where you're coming from and the North Node describing where you're going to. So there's these 2 points on your birth chart that we're always aware of. Now, a lot of it depends on whether you're into past lives and that as a model of karma, or whether you just believe that you're born and you have certain qualities at birth and that you're heading in a particular direction. I don't know what your actual model of the world is. So I'm going to try and keep this as non-specific as possible. But the South Node effectively shows what you've grown really good at and where you have a certain level of expertise. And so it might, if your model of the world is about several past lives, it might describe what you've been doing in those past lives recently, what you've got really good at. Or if you're not somebody who believes in past lives and future lives, it might just describe kind of the God-given talents, what you've come in with this kind of innate understanding and brilliance in. So the South Node really shows your unconscious competence about some special skill that's unique to you, which is rather good, really. The North Node, which can be found 180 degrees in opposition or away from the South Node, describes where you're going and what you're currently learning on a karma level. So it shows where we have difficulty and the need to repeat lessons over and over again. It really shows where we're a little bit thick in picking up the message. It's almost like a life struggle in some way, shape or form. Also, the condition of the North Node is important to look at within your birth chart. So for those of you that have looked at your birth chart, you might have noticed that you've got really good or easy planets and aspects to your North Node, which might be seen with aspects to Venus or Jupiter or the Sun and the Moon that are in maybe sextiles or trines, showing a sort of easy flow and expression of those things that you struggle in life with. It shows that there's support there for you. Or you might have noticed that you have your North Node in a pattern in your birth chart, possibly with squares or oppositions, or even bigger formations like a T-square or something with Pluto or Saturn or Neptune, Uranus. All of those will give you some definite meat for the bones, of your life. It will definitely cause you some development. Ultimately, you're probably likely to resolve your North Node issues with a harder aspect to deal with, because it really does give you the impetus to, when things are a bit too easy, sometimes we don't really bother with the full potential of where we're going. But suffice to say, the North Node is the direction that shows where we're really going to benefit from developing ourselves. So with that understanding in mind, it's worth now considering the 5th house. And like the North House, in the same way as we look at the North Node and we consider the South Node, I think it's important to consider the opposing house. So if we're looking at the 5th house, we also need to look at the 11th house, which is the opposing house. So if we start with the 11th house and the South Node, if you're born with North Node in the 5th house, your South Node is in the 11th, and it shows that you have an ability and a competence with working at an organisational level, and that you're used to collaborating, and that you're able to build strong networks, and you've got really good at it. You know, you're a committee person through and through. You're somebody who has harnessed the power of everybody working towards a goal. I see the 11th house as also being the law of attraction house. So you're probably really skilled at thinking things into reality. You probably have this sort of magical skill in just understanding how all the elements work together, how when you focus your attention in a certain way, that you get certain outcomes. And you probably can't necessarily write it down or talk about it in an articulate way, because it's just how you are and how you're made. You just have this kind of ability to do that. That's all well and good. That's fabulous. So with that in mind, you've got this sort of unconscious competence for creating at some kind of grand scale and making your dreams become a reality. On the other hand, and also I should also add that the 11th house is also quite detached and quite depersonalized. So you also have this ability to stay detached from your goals, which probably actually helps them manifest a lot more quickly, because you take off all the sort of personal meaning, and all of a sudden things can start bubbling up in a really great and unexpected way. So you've got this kind of amazing talent to stay quite detached. When you've got a 5th house North Node, it shows that your challenge is to do with learning personal creativity, and how to relax into being personally creative. So I guess the North Node here is showing that one of your struggles is you're not used to doing it on your own. You're used to just collaborating with people and pulling people into your creations. So much so that you're probably a really good delegator, and that you can't actually consider doing things on your own. It can be quite a challenge for you to get going. As challenges go, this is one of the nicer ones, definitely having the North Node in the 5th house. But we need to have a look at some of the 5th house activities. So the 5th house is traditionally ruled by the sign of Leo and has natural affinity to the sun. So we've got a planet to do with personal power and creativity, and the sign of Leo, which is childlike and innocent and generous and colourful and a bit of a performer, and there's a lot of pride in what activities are taking place there. The 5th house is also to do with the romance, right at the start of the romance, so it's the initial flirtation. It's to do with conception, fertility, and all of those kinds of things. Essentially, if you were to think about what your heart desires, and passion that comes from your heart's desires, I always see it as something that originates from the sacrum, from the sacral chakra, that part of, like the womb, but a collective womb, because I might not just be talking to women here, I might be talking to men too. But if you can imagine, we've all got this kind of womb for birthing ideas. The 5th house is really a place that we give birth to ideas in. So having the North Node in the 5th house shows difficulty birthing. Now, that may or may not be true physically, if you are a woman giving birth, but I guess, and I don't want it to be delivered in a fatalistic way, because a 5th house North Node definitely doesn't suggest or imply that you're going to have difficulties in birthing. What it might indicate are fears or anticipations and anxieties about birthing things on your own, about giving birth to your ideas and being the sole entity responsible for your ideas. So you bear the feeling of responsibility on your shoulders. So if we remember where you're coming from with the South Node excellence in the 11th house, you're detached from the things that you desire. So you have a relaxed desire to achieve things in collaboration with other people. But with the North Node in the 5th house, there is a discomfort with feeling and exploring the things you're passionate about. There's almost like an embarrassment about being so personal and about being so passionate about what you want. So that could cause problems early on in intimate relationships, or in your feelings towards giving birth, or in your feelings towards creating an income for yourself based on your hobbies. The 5th house is really a huge house for hobbies, because it's all run by the things you're passionate about. So there might be some feelings of guilt or embarrassment or shame about following the things you're passionate about. And the real release in the 5th house arrives when you can realise that it's okay to have personal goals. So that's, I think, the challenge in a nutshell. Now, if the North Node is currently transiting your 5th house, so it's moving through the 5th house, it's just recently been in the 6th house, which has all been about business. And so in the last 18 months, your primary concern is getting balance within your life and living the karma of it, understanding the purity or sanctity of having some kind of routine. And it might be the first time that you've ever really explored that consciously. So I would imagine that your life has got a lot more orderly and a lot more understandable and recognisable. And it probably makes sense to people looking in from the outside. The way you work, the way you organise yourself, the way you manage your home, the way you manage your health will have come into alignment. And so now, from this place of having your life looking very comfortable and orderly and regular and routined, the next 18 months for you, from a karma perspective, is giving you the grace and the space to explore what's important to you, explore the things you're passionate about, explore your hobbies that maybe have been on a back burner. Maybe think, okay, well, my work's ticking over, but I'd really like to find some greater satisfaction with what I'd like to give birth to. I'd like to give birth to something magical and creative and really deeply personal. The 5th house also represents children and sex and fertility and conception. So it could also, if you are of childbearing age and you're in that position and that's what you're hoping for, it could also show that actually where your karma's heading right now is it's in making, you've already set up your home and you already feel comfortable at home, everything's going well. Now might be the time, you've made your nest, now might be the time when you're ready to conceive and improve your fertility, conceive and give birth to a child. It might be a time, now that your life is sorted, that you are ready for a relationship and start to enjoy yourself sexually. So whatever we give birth to, whatever feeling or personal experience we give birth to, whether it's actual babies, whether it's sexual, romantic, whether it's creative, cooking, art, music, whatever we're passionate about is what is coming forward and into our lives. And that's the thing to embrace over the next 18 months. As North Nodes go, this transit's not a bad one. It's really not. It's actually quite a good one to work on, I think, and one that could lead to so much more. Anyway, I hope this has been useful. If any of these things that we've mentioned in this podcast have raised any issues, or if you'd like to explore anything, then please do drop me a line. You can reach me at Louisa, that's Louisa, at feelgoodastrology.com. Take care.
You've been listening to Feel Good Astrology with Louisa Tanner Munson, and this recording has been made possible by all you lovely supporters at Patreon. To request a personal reading with Louisa, go to www.feelgoodastrology.com.